Eleni, I want to say thank you so much for your hospitality tonight. I've been following your work since Stanford, and when you founded the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange, I have tremendous respect for your courage, for your hard work, for your vision, for your love for people, and for your capacity to get things done and lift other people up. So this is a real joy and privilege for me to be here with you. Thank you so much. So how do you see others? The way we see others produces the society we see. If we see others as cheap, we tolerate poverty. If we see others as worthless, we accept violence. But if we see people as precious, we will work for peace, justice, and prosperity. We live in a time of othering. Othering means seeing people as unrelated or less than ourselves. We divide ourselves into insiders, outsiders, and enemies, often along religious, ethnic, and political lines. I'm convinced othering is our greatest threat today. Look at our society. We see lynchings, burnings, displacements, and this is because we see others as unrelated, less, or even evil. Of course, we see these problems in America and across the world. This is a problem that is a human problem. Our violent vision isn't too different from ancient perspectives when we take a historical point of view. In the ancient world, the majority of people were seen as slaves. In the best-selling story of the day called Enuma Elish, violent gods made a violent world. One god named Marduk violently murders another goddess named Tiamat, and he makes the oceans from her blood and the earth from her body. Then he slaughters another god and uses its corpse to make humans. In this culture-shaping myth, we are literally constructed from murder and death. Kings and priests sat at the top of this bloody hierarchy. Everyone else built temples and farmed fields for the gods sleeping and feasting. Human life was cheap. Now imagine if you saw people that way, the aftermath of violent conflict turned into raw labor for the powerful. But a radical named Moses had the audacity to see people with different eyes. He said the world was made out of meaningful communication and words of life. He said that all humans, men and women equally, are made in God's image, not just kings and priests. Moses democratized the human imagination and human worth. Each and every person has precious value and is made for a purpose that serves our shared flourishing, not hierarchy, violence, and slavery. You're made from divine creativity. You're a diamond humming with infinite potential. See the other with new eyes, Moses says. It's no surprise that Moses went on to say those 5 world-changing words: love your neighbor as yourself. See people as moral equals, not more, not less than yourself, but equally beloved. Shockingly, Moses included the most unexpected people in his vision of the neighbor. People who are close to us and matter to our hearts. He mentioned the deaf, the blind, and the foreigner. Of course, those are the people that we can use and abuse with no risk of retribution. It's still that way today. But Moses says to see them as our neighbors. Love them as yourself. Not just as equals, but as affectionate equals who touch your heart and call for your joy and justice. This was a revolution in moral vision, from seeing others as cheap to seeing a divine reflection, from seeing humans as slaves to seeing humans as neighbors. This was the beginning of the neighbor love movement. It was like our eyes were opening for the first time. Jesus radicalized the neighbor love movement. When Jesus was asked, "Who is my neighbor?" he named the religious heretic, the ethnic other, the political enemy. That's your neighbor, according to Jesus. See them. Don't look away. Come near them. Don't stay in your own bubble. Care for them. Don't close your heart. Help them. Don't hurt them. Bless them. Don't curse them. Jesus called for creative action that embodies freedom, strength, and service at the same time. When you are a neighbor to others, everyone becomes a neighbor to you. Do this and you will live, Jesus promises. Now, Jesus said some of the most extraordinary words that had never been said before in human history. He said, "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I say to you, love your enemy." Those three words had never been spoken before in history together. Love your enemy. Imagine this shift in vision. Even the enemy has precious value. This is the basis of Arthur Brooks' profound 2019 book, Love Your Enemies: How Decent People Can Save America from the Culture of Contempt. The neighbor love movement exploded ancient mythology, and then it overcame its own boundaries. Even the enemy, the hated, untouchable outsider, should be seen as precious. Jesus said God is hidden in the hungry, the thirsty, the sick, the naked, the foreigner, and the prisoner, the least. No wonder people saw Jesus as precious and as dangerous. The neighbor love movement initiated an ancient explosion of hospitals, orphanages, and schools because new categories of people were seen as precious neighbors. New words and institutions were created to keep up with this new vision. The way people saw others was producing the society they saw. Now, Muhammad continued this radical neighbor love movement. He taught, do good to your neighbors near and far, and demanded reconciliation between people. He taught that our diversity is God's gift. He declared the most virtuous behavior is to engage those who break relations, to give to those who withhold from you, and to forgive those who wrong you. He practiced such radical generosity to his poor neighbors that his family thought he was going to give his inheritance to his neighbors rather than to his family. A century later, Abu Hanifa, known as the great Imam, taught, "The man who disrupts my teaching is my neighbor. Even if he harms me, I will never harm my neighbor." Later in this story, the man who was harassing Imam Abu Hanifa is arrested. When the great Imam finds out, he goes to the authorities in the middle of the night. They tell him to go home and return in the morning. But the great Imam insists that he won't leave the prison until this man is released. Why? Because he is a neighbor. He said, "My neighbor has been imprisoned. If my neighbor has defrauded someone of his right, I will take care of it. If he has oppressed other people, I will take care of it." The great Imam is the one who declares, even if he harms me, I will never harm my neighbor. These are the ancient treasures of Ethiopia. Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions of neighbor love. I experienced this for myself in Harar a few years ago. As a crazy American, I heard about the amazing hospitality of Harari people. So, I just picked a random door on a small street and I knocked. A woman came to the door and she warmly invited me in. She offered me food. Then she introduced me to her husband Abdi, and he invited me to sit with him for the afternoon. He told me about his vision of Islam. And he told me that he loves Allah because Allah created all of us and protects all of us with his justice. My heart was filled with warmth in Abdi's house, and I left feeling like a new person. This family had warmly welcomed a complete stranger into their home as a beloved neighbor. Thankfully, this tradition is still alive, even in the midst of extreme violence. And I think all of you have seen this powerful picture. But the neighbor love movement is far from only being Jewish, Christian, and Muslim. Neighbor love is the heart of democracy, the political philosophy that each life and every voice matters. Democracy institutionalizes neighbor love in law and culture. Law limits power to protect the rights of every citizen equally who are innocent until proven guilty. Society becomes a moral neighborhood where all have the opportunity to flourish with rights and responsibilities for the common good. Now, neighbor love was the engine of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s civil rights movement, who is one of my personal heroes. King insisted that every person of every color, creed, and class is our neighbor. So segregation can't make sense. Discriminatory laws and culture can't make sense. Racism can't make sense. So what is needed is nonviolent resistance until law is just and society recognizes the precious value of every one of its neighbors. King called for a global good neighbor policy to lead us into a new future. And I love this quotation. Dr. King said, "Love is mankind's most potent weapon for personal and social transformation. More than ever before, people of all races and nations are today challenged to be neighborly. The call for a worldwide good neighbor policy is the call to a way of life that will transform our imminent cosmic elegy, Alexo, into a psalm of creative fulfillment, Nililta." Václav Havel was an agnostic dissident, the first president of the Czech Republic, and a passionate advocate of democratic values. Havel said it like this: "Identity is not a prison. Identity is not a prison. It is an appeal for dialogue with others. Love for one's fellow humans is the central commandment of all our contending cultures." How do you see others? We've come a long way from the Enuma Elish's ancient vision of hierarchy, slavery, and violence. But sometimes when we look at our society, it seems like we're still trapped in that violent vision with its hostile imagination. Look at the violence, the displacement, the destruction of life and community. It makes me weep. But another vision is rooted in our shared moral tradition. Moses saw people as a reflection of God, as beloved neighbors, even the weakest and the most vulnerable. Jesus saw the most hated and excluded people as neighbors, as people with precious value. Muhammad called for doing good to neighbors near and far. Democratic visionaries like Dr. King and President Havel called for this ancient neighbor love movement to go global, to be recognized as the heart of what it means to be human. Balinjeraye, or the neighbor love movement, exists to inspire and expand this vision in Ethiopia today. The political other is my neighbor. The ethnic other is my neighbor. The religious other is my neighbor. The other person is my neighbor. Whoever you are my neighbor first before anything else. You have precious value. You are a diamond. Together we have precious value. We're related to one another, not less, not more, but precious. My heart is open to you. I want you to flourish. Now, Balinjeraye's mission is to inspire young people to become neighbor love ambassadors in their personal and professional lives. A neighbor love ambassador commits to our covenant and embodies 7 practices. I want to read this covenant to you real quick. Today, I covenant to love my neighbor as myself. Every woman, man, and child is my neighbor across every boundary and identity. I choose to see and treat my neighbors with value, respect, and practical compassion. Today, I say yes. I am an ambassador of neighbor love. And the neighbor love covenant gets embodied in 7 practices that don't require any money or any technology or any internet, just your own body as the most powerful startup in the world. VI, see others as your neighbor, as someone with precious value. Your ears, open your ears to listen to other people's voice with patience, even when you disagree. Your mouth, speak to people with respect and dignity and truth, even when you disagree. Apologize and ask forgiveness when you make a mistake. Resist speaking words of insult, generalization, and hatred. Your hands, serve your neighbors with justice and compassion. Use your power to lift other people up rather than tearing them down. Your heart, open your heart to the other person's joy and pain. Bless them and release envy, grudges, curses, and desire for revenge. Your feet, go closer to your neighbors rather than moving farther away. Break out of your bubbles and get to know other people. And finally, your brain. Refuse to separate your values from the way you live. Live an integrated life. With this covenant and these practices, who I am and how I live takes on a new sense of meaning and mission, starting with my body. Not just words and ideas, starting with my body. Everything matters because everyone matters. We're launching weekly social media content and hosting monthly events in regional universities and here in Addis. If you want to go deeper, we invite you to join us in praying for a new neighbor every day. I think you're going to be surprised by the neighbors on our prayer list. We've also got a book and a course coming out. We're calling on leaders to become neighbor love ambassadors. We're calling you to embrace monthly challenges, to cross boundaries and love neighbors that you might ordinarily stay away from. So this vision becomes embodied in a way of life before violence and hatred rips us apart. What contemporary researchers are finding, Eleni, is that the neighbor love movement is worth billions of dollars for human flourishing. For example, in 2015, the Times of London, the premier newspaper in London, published an article titled, "Love Thy Neighbor is Priceless, but it's also worth £3 billion." The Cinnamon Network researched the amount of hours faith-based groups volunteered to serve their neighbors for free in 1 year. This service included free debt counseling, free addiction rehab, free food distribution, free housing for the homeless. Then they multiplied those hours by the minimum wage and discovered that Neighbor Love had injected £3 billion worth of value into the UK economy in just 1 year. The Cinnamon Network has just published their research on the United States, focused on New York City and Washington, D.C. What they've found is that Neighbor Love is injecting at least $8.8 billion towards human flourishing in America. Now, I wonder how many billions of birr the Neighbor Love movement could inject into Ethiopia's economy as we commit to this covenant and embody these 7 practices in our personal and professional life. Neighbor love isn't just about feeling warm and fuzzy. Neighbor love is will and work for others' well-being. Neighbor love is will and work for others' well-being, and its impact is measurable in billions of dollars for human flourishing. When you see people as neighbors, society is enriched. Addictions are broken, mental health increases, skills are acquired, jobs are created, industries and institutions are developed, and prosperity is generated. Human life shines like the diamond it is. I'm convinced the Neighbor Love movement can produce peace in Ethiopia, but it can also produce prosperity in Ethiopia. It can produce the soft values that generate concrete human dignity, dialogue, trust, cooperation, innovation, and flourishing that turns into jobs and justice and an economy that honors the preciousness of being human. How do you see others? The way we see others produces the society we see. We invite you to see others as neighbors and make Ethiopia a moral neighborhood of love, justice, and human flourishing. It's worth billions of birr for Ethiopia. But for me, if it saves just one life, it's worth far more. I want to end with an invitation. Will you sign our covenant and become a neighbor love ambassador for our time who crosses boundaries to embrace others? Will you choose to make your body a living, breathing startup of love, justice, and flourishing? You can sign today and get started on our website. Now, it is my honor to invite Dr. Eleni to become our first Neighbor Love Ambassador right now. Eleni, I'm inspired by your work. I love your values, and I love your passionate commitment to changing the world and making life better. Thanks for supporting our work. What I'd like to do is I'd like to present you with our Neighbor Love Covenant, and I'd like to ask if you would sign it and become our first Neighbor Love Ambassador. Neighbor Love Ambassador. Thank you.
I am almost speechless. I have a lot of questions for you, but I just want to breathe so I can recompose myself so that we can have this little chat. But I just want to tell you that what really touches me most about all of this is that you don't have to do this. You know, we're in a mess here. All of us Ethiopians. This is the mess we created. It's our mess. And here you are, Andrew, kind of dropped in from Chicago. And here you are putting your heart and your soul into this. And that, I think, is the biggest demonstration of what neighbor means. It doesn't mean we have to have the same passport or the same ethnic or racial or whatever. It just means we care. And I think that's, to me, what's so touching about this event. So let me just give you a chance to tell us about who you are. So Andrew, how did you come? First of all, who are you? You are a person of faith, I believe. Yeah. But what drove you to be doing this? Because I don't think it was easy to go have that conversation with Jawar or Iskander or all the other people you're probably knocking on doors. Yeah. Takes a lot of persistence. You are a Faranj. They're probably very suspicious of you. Maybe we're suspicious of you. I don't know. But the main thing is, who are you? Tell us that. Let's start.
Thanks so much, Eleni. I'm a simple person. I was raised by my mom and dad. And I was taught from an early age that human life has value, and that we're meant to love other people, and that we're meant to serve other people. It could look like cleaning a toilet. It could look like delivering a newspaper. It could look like writing a book. It could look like creating a business. But from my childhood, my parents taught me that human life has value, and that this is the core of what it means to be human, is to see and to love other people as equals. And I think that where I grew up had an important role in my life. I grew up actually in a town called East Aurora. At the time, it had one of the highest murder rates in the United States. There were drug houses on either side of my house. You'd see the lights flickering on and off in the middle of the night to tell the dealers to come and to get the drugs. We had drive-by shootings, people firing guns out their windows on my street. And we also had a lot of ethnic diversity in the neighborhood where I grew up. My neighborhood was primarily African American and Mexican, and I had a best friend who was Mexican and Puerto Rican as a kid. And I discovered that human life is profoundly valuable, and that our most important work is to build bridges with other people that challenges things like violence, that challenges things that destroy and diminish human life. And I'd like to just tell one very brief story about someone who changed my life, a neighbor who changed my life, and now maybe I might start crying. But on May 1st, 2010, I was sitting at a cafe called Beytana in Sarbate, and I met a little boy. He came up to the table and he asked for money. And I said no, and he walked away. And then he was wearing a hood, and his hood fell off. And as he walked away, I could see the worst head wound that I had ever seen in my life. And I had a moment of moral struggle. I don't know if you've ever had one of these moments where you're like, do I do something or do I just sit here and keep eating my lunch? And I'm a Christian, and I felt like God said to me, Andrew, if you say no to this child, you've said no to me. And so I got out of my seat, and I walked down the street, and I met this boy, and his name was Eob. His name was Job. And I could see his brain pulsating through his skull. And I found out afterwards that Eob had fallen in a cooking fire as a little boy in Hosanna. And his injury had gotten so bad that his parents had to send him on a truck to Addis to beg for help or die. And what I discovered in Eob, Eleni, was that he wasn't pitiful, he wasn't weak, he wasn't sad, he was joyful and strong and visionary. You know, his dream was to become a pastor and a professor in Ethiopia who would show people that there's hope even in the midst of our darkest situations. And when your head is literally rotting, you can be an ambassador of hope. And we took Eob to the hospital, and he got so many surgeries, and we thought that he was going to recover. But then these growths started returning to his head. And the doctor said, I'm sorry, we've done everything that we can. You should send Eob back to his family so that he can die with people who know and love him. And that's what we did. And Eob died in February of 2011 while I was working on my PhD in ethics. And when Eob died, I received the call to continue the movement that I felt like Eob started of seeing and treating others with precious value, even in the midst of extraordinary suffering. So I talk about Eob as the founder of the Neighbor Love movement, and he's inspired me to cross boundaries and to embrace others that we typically reject.
You know, we all have those moments where we know it's that moment, right? When we know that this is a sign that something's got to change. I know every one of us has had that moment, whether it's the day you decide that you're going to quit your job and go do that thing that your heart tells you should do, or you're going to get out of a relationship that is, toxic and that you need to do something about. There are many things that we have those signs, but not everybody follows them. How do you find is it courage? Is it will to say, I need to do this? How do you do that, Andrew? Because I think even today, I'm just thinking, wow, there's a lot of things I need to do. I mean, I've had moments and I've talked about them and given interviews about how it was that there's like literally a day when I said I'm moving to Ethiopia, or the day that I said we're going to start Bluemoon. But there's always something else that your heart is called to, and finding that courage. How do you do that?
I'm still learning to be a courageous person. But I'll say that I think everyday life is the most important place in our lives. What are our daily practices? Do we talk to the Listros? Do we build friendship across boundaries? Do we choose to find ways to serve others? Do we have habits of reflection where I think about who are the people that I have grudges with in my life and how can I live a life of forgiveness and liberation? Do we have time where we can pause and reflect about our values, what we consider to be most important in the life worth living? I think that a life of courage and service emerges out of everyday life. Practices of prayer, practices of listening to people, talking to neighbors, smiling at others, stopping to get to know people who are strangers, deciding to forgive when it's burning in your heart. I can tell you, Eleni, I had a very painful experience with some people that were very important to me. And I decided that every time I thought of them, I would bless them. And this went on for years. Came in my head, today, bless them, encourage them, help them to grow, help them to become stronger. Nobody saw these things. I wasn't writing about it on Facebook, but part of daily life. And Nelson Mandela said that he didn't become a freedom fighter in one day, but he said it was the 1,000 visions of his society that had slowly cultivated in him the strength and courage to resist and to survive in 26 years on Robben Island and then to become one of the most radical figures of forgiveness in our world. So I'd say it starts in everyday life, and I would ask each one of us, what are our practices that we've committed to that are helping us to grow into the people we want to become? And we've tried to just outline 7. How do you see? How do you hear? How do you speak? How do you use your hands? How do you move your feet? What's going on in the heart? What's going on in the mind? These are things that you can do in the bathroom. They're things that you can do at work. They're things that you can do with kids. They're things that you can do in your darkest hour.
So I have signed this piece of paper.
Yep.
What do I do next?
I love this question. Don't do anything different. Keep doing what you're doing. You know what? I visited Eleni last week, and I saw something extremely profound. I stepped out of that elevator and into this door, and do you know what she immediately started doing? Oh, you have to meet Beatty. She's doing the most amazing work. Oh, you have to meet the most amazing work. Oh, you have to meet. And she knew all of their stories. She knew all of their data. She knew their missions. And she was elevating them to serve the flourishing of Ethiopian society. That's neighbor love in a business context. How many bosses do we have that are pushing people down, holding them out of the spotlight, trying to make them feel smaller? Eleni was lifting up and strengthening others to do what they were created to do. So I would say, don't do anything differently. Keep doing what you're doing, because you're already living it.
If I'd have known this was going to be about me, I'd have invited you a long time ago. But really, not to make it about me, but it's just that I feel like I guess the question is, why did you decide that this was the right time? Besides the fact that everything's happening, why did you decide that this was the right time to launch this movement? And what do you, as an American, married, I know you're married to a beautiful Ethiopian woman, I've followed both of your stories on social media. What is it that you want to see in this Ethiopia that made you decide to stop everything else and do this?
I love Ethiopians. I love Ethiopia. I have learned so much from Ethiopian people about the meaning of resilience and creativity and service and incredible endurance in the midst of grief, incredible cheerfulness and joy in the midst of sorrow, incredible industriousness in the midst of challenge. So Eleni, the first reason that I'm here is a learner. I'm here to learn from you and from my friend Ndegana and from Aiden and from Tekalen. I'm here to learn from you about what it means to be human and how to live and grow. And I think that we also all agree that Ethiopia is in a particularly dangerous moment. I was giving a presentation at the National Policy Dialogue Forum last week, and I was talking about forgiveness. And I started my talk by saying, have you ever been insulted, excluded, or attacked? Have you ever had a family member who's been killed? And then when the question and answer started, a man raised his hand and said, I'm one of the people you were talking about. My uncle was murdered recently in Ethiopia. Human life is precious, and we see people being displaced. We see people being killed. I hear more and more people talking about the fear that they're living with, and I think that neighbor love is a response to this challenge. So I believe in hard work. I believe in timely work. I also believe in work that has eternal value, and I think that neighbor love is that kind of work. It's hard. It's responding to the time, and it's the way that we should always live. So I'm a beginner and I'm a learner, and I'm here to collaborate and serve with my partner, Dr. Tekalen Nega, with my friend Fitsumad Mazu, and our whole team. How can we work to serve in Ethiopia where love and justice and flourishing are the stories that we're telling? Because these are the deepest and most beautiful Ethiopian stories.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you guys need to clap for that. That was a pretty amazing thing you said. So what are we going to see? And what's your vision for this movement over the next, and we're going to soon open it up, but I just want to know, like, in the next few months, and hopefully we're all going to sign up in our hearts, sign up on your website, sign up on that piece of paper over there, wherever we sign up, let's get on with it. But what do you hope and pray and, dream that this movement will bring?
Thanks for asking that important question. So you're going to see weekly social media content that's going to be created. So we've got a Facebook page, Instagram, Telegram, Twitter, and YouTube. So you're going to be seeing constantly new content. Some of it will be posts, some of it will be interviews, some of it will be documentaries. For example, we have already we're getting to the end of finishing a documentary about how the Orthodox Church, the Islamic community, the Pentecostal community, and the Catholic community understands neighbor love. We've interviewed some really interesting people who are talking about this. So there's going to be lots of social media content that we'd love to see you engaging. And that social media content is going to have a monthly challenge. So for example, our first month is the question, how do you see others? And I'm trying to talk with Iskander, and I'm trying to talk with Jawar. And we want to challenge you to talk with someone that you might not usually talk with, and take a selfie, maybe write a story, maybe take a short iPhone video, and tell us about what you learned from your neighbor that you moved your feet and got closer to. So we want to hear from you and learn from you about how you're practicing neighbor love and how it's changing your life. We've also got a course. It's a 3.5-hour Amharic course that's broken up into 5-minute sections. It was taught by my dear friend and partner, Dr. Tekalen Nega, so we want to invite you to take a neighbor love course. It's 3.5 hours online. It's going to be free. It's going to be on YouTube. We've got a book coming out. But beyond social media content, we're going to be having events every month in regional universities. So on Saturday and Sunday, we're going to be at the University of Gondar. And we're going to be challenging students in Gondar to become neighbor love ambassadors. We want to go to Dredwa, we want to go to Walaita Sodo, we'd love to go to Ambo, we'd love to go to Mekelle, we'd love to go all over, and then we're going to be having monthly events in Addis Ababa where we're going to be featuring inspiring people who are talking about how they're living neighbor love in their professional life. So this could be lawyers, judges, business creators, pastors, priests, imams, moms and dads. So just stay tuned.
Cool. I'm excited. You know, there is a movement around the world. I want to come a little bit to what we do here at Bluemoon and why we wanted you here. Besides the fact that you're awesome. You know, there's a movement that the essence of business as we know it seems to be changing. Yes. And the way this millennial, Generation X, whatever you call them, this generation feels uniquely challenged to improve mankind, our lives, our planet. You know, look at this young girl, Greta Thunberg, incredible. We have so many examples of people who are saying, just making money is not my life purpose. Making the world a better place. This whole concept of social enterprise, of being impactful, of doing purposeful things. And to me, it's really about what you're talking about, service, and feeling that you are on this earth to do something that transcends you. And so I want to do something, and I did not plan this until right now, that we want to incorporate your class into our incubator. Because I cannot think of what is more important than for people to say, my purpose, Abby over here, and yes, I'm going to now start bragging about my incubated companies. Abby is an embedded systems engineer, electrical engineer. And his idea is to put sensors in beehives so that beekeepers, I think we told you about this last time, can know which beehive, you know, is facing a distress by the bees. The sound or the temperature would go up. That alerts the beekeeper. But when Abby tells you the story, he doesn't tell you that about engineering or sensor technology or stuff which I would have no idea about, big data, artificial intelligence. What he tells you is bees are important for the health and well-being of our planet. I care about our planet. I want to save bees because I care about Earth. So that's his love. That's his higher purpose. And to allow people the language, not just to, you know, say these things because it might fit into their pitch, but to really practice where all that comes from and how they grow that purpose is, I think, so huge. So I just want to tell you, we're going to start our next batch in early December, and we're with you. And you're going to be part of our incubator.